Hello, beautiful people, and welcome. Hi. To a video talking about Powercreep in Genshin. It's been a while since I posted a video on the channel where it's kind of just unfiltered yap about a topic. But the topic of Powercreep has become a lot more relevant lately with Mavuika's release, and I wanted to talk about it. First things first, we need to actually define Powercreep because terminology that became common usage through the internet tends to have very vague definitions. And if you try to look up a definition, you'll have a lot of definitions that aren't really saying the same thing. But I just want to clarify what I mean by the word power creep so that you guys don't get confused if you use it in a slightly different way. Power creep defines the trend of, in this case, games, to release new content that makes old content obsolete. When it comes to gacha games, power creep manifests in characters becoming stronger over time. Newer characters being better than old characters. That being said, the word power creep is an inherently negatively connotated word. It's inherently pejorative. If there's an increase in character power and there are no problems that arise from that, then who the f cares? You would only talk about power creep if that increase in character power actually leads to issues. And up until pretty much the very start of Fontaine, I would have made an argument, or I would have made the argument that there wasn't real power creep in Genshin because while there were the release of new characters that increased the overall power of the average character and new characters being stronger than older characters, if you look at what was the best teams in 1.0, not the most popular teams, the best teams in 1.0, we already had some relatively good teams, and maybe more importantly, most of them used 2 to 3 of the really good 4-stars at the time, right? Bennett, Fischl, Sucrose, Singto, Xiangling. And back then, my perception of the game was the reason why the new characters they're releasing are better than the characters that are currently out, if they are, is because right now we don't have a lot of good characters. We have 4 or 5 good characters, and then we have shit like Diluc. And the ceiling didn't really get particularly increased. Now, the ceiling in terms of DPS did go up pre-Sumeru, but it didn't really go up by that much. As it turns out, National is still a good team. And while there were, the release of units that could have overtaken National and become, significantly better, they also, at the same time, kept releasing non-unit content that made National stronger. Right? It was a meme at the time that every patch was a Xiangling buff. Especially in early Inazuma with Emblem and the Catch. In other words, while there was a slow increase of character power level, the strong 1.0 teams were keeping up with it. And so I don't think it was really a problem. Now, when I say it wasn't a problem, I'm talking in terms of the overall meta. Obviously, if you're someone who really likes Diluc, it's still gonna feel like ass when they keep releasing characters that are better than him and you're starting to struggle. But we'll get back to that. And then in Sumeru, they released Dendro. And Dendro was another thing that increased the power of teams. But Dendro didn't really raise the ceiling of good teams. It more so gave a lot of units that didn't see much play very strong teams that were competitive with the other strong teams. Units like Kuki, units like Toma. Nilo made units like Candace better. And it also gave a lot of alternatives to the characters that had already been a little left behind, right? Like Ayato got a lot of strong Hyperbloom teams. And then Fontaine came around. And in 1.0, everything was fine. Liddy, okay, whatever. And then Neuvillette happened. And Neuvillette was the first character that I thought was actual power creep in a potentially problematic way, in a way that could actively harm the health of the meta. Neuvillette wasn't a ceiling raiser, but especially once Farina came out, who's a very good teammate for him, pretty much reached that ceiling while also being incredibly easy to play and having pretty much all the quality of life. And the reason why that's kind of bad for the health of the game is that now that Neuvillette has been released, if they want to sell a character that has quality of life issues, right? Because as it turns out, like, sometimes it's a good idea. You give characters flaws to make them feel more dynamic, right? The characters that are harder to play feel more rewarding because they're harder to play. Anyways, point being, if you release a character that has less quality of life than Neuvillette and deals less damage than Neuvillette, you don't really want to go for them. And now with Natlan, I feel like they're really saying like, yeah, all right, now is the time to like actually go for that ceiling and like significantly increase it. That in a vacuum isn't like necessarily that big of a deal. Like, yes, it's a gacha game. It sucks when the power of your account is like decided by how recent the units you have are. But to some extent, when you're playing a gacha game, you kind of have to accept that their goal isn't to make you happy, it's to make money. And sometimes making their players unhappy intentionally and selling them a solution is what they're gonna do. I'm not saying it's good, but at least I have a certain amount of tolerance for it, up to a certain point. But the way they've been doing it lately, I think has been, like, overtly scummy. And it's getting pretty bad. Just in this patch, they have released a unit that pretty much almost says in the text, if you don't have another Natlan 5-star, your team is gonna suck. It doesn't, like, outright say this, but, like, it's the incredibly clear logical conclusion of reading the kit, right? In Mavuika. And they made it so that her teams are the ones that deal the most damage in the game. They made her run at the same time as another 5-star before we get most of our free-to-play wishes in the later half of the patch with Lantern, right? And here I'm gonna touch a little bit on leaks because I'm recording this on the 11th and the Abyss is gonna change on the 16th, and I want to talk about the Abyss that's coming, the Mavuika Abyss. They're bringing back for the first time since like 1.4 or some shit, Leyline Disorders in Abyss. And they're making it, they have something that pretty much says Mavuika gains 75 damage %. All three of these things are like incredibly significant when it comes to how it will affect your experience. On top of that, if you look at the enemies in Abyss, right? You have enemies that are really weak to Pyro on the second side, but also that require either a lot of Night Soul bullshit or like an insane amount of application. In other words, you really want to play Mavuika. In my mind, this is just really sad. It feels like such an overt, like, hey, get Mavuika. But then on top of that, right, you also have to realize, when it comes to the total amount of HP on 12-1, or on 12-2 and 12-3, right? 12-2, highest amount of HP we've ever had on a 12-2 floor. And then on top of the fact that it's the highest amount of HP we've ever had, we also have a boss that gains an insane amount of resistances that you need to deal with specific elemental reactions, and incredibly large shields that you have to break that will take forever without Night Soul. The amount of time that it will take you to break these shields means that the DPS requirements are actually much higher than you would expect just looking at the total amount of HP. Which means the difficulty of Abyss is going up sharply. It's something that's been going on for a few patches already, but this is just like yet another example of it. And it feels like it's more and more trying to make you feel like if you want to clear, you have to get the newest unit. Now, I do want to get this out of the way because I know that there's going to be some people that will defend this, saying like, I've been able to clear Abyss without even having to try for the past 2-3 years. It's kind of boring. I want more difficult content. And I agree with that idea, but I don't think that's a good reason. I don't think that's good justification for the sharp increase in Abyss difficulty. And it boils down to the psychology of the way they're doing this shit. They're not adding new difficult content. They're taking the content that is like the benchmark for how invested your account is, and they're making it so that accounts that were able to clear it can't clear it anymore. It's not about building your characters more to progress. It's about being forced to build your characters so you don't regress. And it just feels so much worse. And it's frustrating, and it's intentional. They want it to be frustrating because they think they're going to make more money that way. But understanding that it's intentional and like that they're not going to change it just because I'm pissed about it doesn't mean I'm not allowed to be pissed about it. You know, I'm still pissed about it. In any case, with all of that being said, Genshin's power creep is not nearly as bad as a lot of other gacha games. It has taken a turn for the worse lately, and the speed of the power creep has significantly accelerated in the past, like, pretty much 6-7 patches. But at least sitting on the sideline looking at Sorrel players and what they have to deal with, I get to be like, well, at least it's not that bad. And I'm also aware that Star Rail is not even close to the worst gacha game in terms of power creep. Genshin actually is reaching the point where it's becoming actually hard to clear with 4 stars only. Now, I think you'll probably be able to see 4-star only clears for the whole duration of the game. I don't think it'll ever be completely impossible with like really well invested accounts and like perfect gameplay and all that, right? If you're doubting, just go take a look at Furu's videos, all right? Furu plays Amber Carry and Lynette Freeze 4-star only teams without using Singtao, Bennett, Tenling, like any of the good units. But also, that's like really, really good artifacts and an incredibly talented player resetting for hours to get the good run and ending up on the clock exactly at 7 minutes getting the clear. And high conflations on the 4 stars. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is like, I doubt Genshin's Abyss will ever reach the point where it's impossible to clear with 4 stars, but I think it's already getting to the point where it's unreasonable to expect to clear with 4 stars only. And depending on which 5 stars you have, if the carries you have don't work well in a given Abyss, it's possible that your account, unless you're playing incredibly well or like have insane artifacts, it's possible that like your roster just will struggle to clear, even if you have a relatively well invested old account. And you know, they're gonna use that to try to convince you to pull for the newest unit. But then on top of that, like I was saying earlier, it's not just enough to pull for the newest unit, because the newest unit, well, is kind of ass unless she's also with another one of the newest units. In any case, I'm starting to get a little pissed with the Genshin power creep. I want difficult content, but I don't think it's particularly fun if the difficulty just comes from higher DPS check and character checks. I think that fights that are actually mechanically difficult are the best way to do difficulty. I do think that there exists a need for high DPS check content, but when it's the only real form of endgame content that you have, it feels like ass. One thing I will say, giving them credit where credit's due, as much as the Papilla Void Ward shield is probably the worst mechanic they've added in this game, and I hate it very much, I really like the fact that they added a white mechanic. An enemy attack that's actually gonna one-shot you. I think that's a really good thing, and I hope that's the kind of direction they keep taking. I don't like that even if you manage to avoid the white mechanic, it'll still gain infinite resistances and be unkillable. I think that makes the fact that it wipes kind of irrelevant. Like, so for those of you who don't know, if you don't manage to break the Papilla shield in time, it'll do an attack that does an insane amount of damage and applies a debuff that deals another insane amount of damage after a couple seconds. And that can be pretty much enough to one-shot you if you don't manage to deal with it either by running out of range or iframing it. But iframing it or running out of range aren't really viable strategies against the Papilla, because after the white mechanic, if you didn't break the shield, it gains an insanely high amount of resistance to every element. And so you'll have to reset anyways if you didn't break it in time. Now, there are some teams that have enough shred that they can still make it through, but to me, it kind of removes the use and the need for a white mechanic. Like, it's not really a white mechanic, it's just a... Like, you'll have to reset whether you dodge it or not, because it just has a lot of resistances. And like, obviously, like I said, you can technically have so much investment that it doesn't matter, but at that point, you probably have the teams that can deal with it anyways. In other words, the ways in which you can engage with the white mechanic, other than breaking the shield, only matter to whales. They only matter if you have an unreasonably high amount of DPS. Because if you don't, then the higher resistances will make it so that even if you manage to not die to the white mechanic, you still won't clear in time, so you still have to reset. So it's as if you had died to it. That's what makes it kind of boring. Like, it could be really good. It is really good in concept, but the execution just doesn't do it for me. Anyways, I hope they do more wipe mechanics, and I hope that they're mechanics that are actually interesting in practice, unlike the Papilla. I hope they stop giving team building restrictions that are as narrow as they are, right? Having pretty much a need for hydro units and pretty much a need for geo units on one side, and really high power resistant enemies, and then on the other side having high electro resistant enemies and pretty much a need for either Nisol or really high application and pretty much a need for bow users. Like, that's too many restrictions. There's so many teams that are just kind of unplayable in this abyss, and it's sad. And the main reason why it's sad is because we don't have another form of endgame content where we can use the units we like, right? If your unit is bad for this abyss, that's a full month that you're not gonna play it in any form of endgame content because it's just bad, even if it's a good unit. And it just feels like ass, right? It feels so bad. Anyways, all this to say, the issue of power creep is currently being exacerbated by how restrictive abysses have been lately and seemingly will continue to keep being for the foreseeable future. If this actually makes it to live, I don't even know what to say if this makes it to live, dude. That's actually crazy. If this enemy actually makes it into abyss at 4.3 million HP, no, surely it won't, right? What's this gonna be, like 2 waves of 2 Rift Hounds into triple Kenki? Knowing them, they're gonna decide to do these 3 enemies over 3 different waves, so you can't even AoE them. Anyways, this video didn't really have a proper direction to it because I just wanted to get my yap out of the way for when it comes to the topic of power creep. Let me know what you think about it. Like, I'm actually kind of curious to see how bothered people are by power creep. I don't like it because the way they're doing it makes so many teams just feel bad to play. If all they did was increase the DPS requirements but didn't have all those restrictions, it would make it harder to clear with the weaker teams, but you could still try to do it and have fun with it instead of trying to kill this guy without a hydro unit, which is just a great way to get a aneurysm at 25 years old and die. That's because personally, I'm someone who obviously I'm a full-time streamer, so I play Genshin every day, and that means that my free gem economy is gonna be enough to keep up with power creep trends. And so what's gonna affect me the most personally is just the fact that there's a lot of the fun teams that I like playing that I won't be able to play sometimes. But just because a specific issue doesn't affect me doesn't mean it doesn't affect other people. And while the danger of not being able to max star anymore is not something that will probably ever apply to me, that doesn't mean I can't see just how much harder it is becoming to 36 star. Most of all, I'm like crossing my fingers and hoping that they're doing it like a staircase where like you had the old ceiling and like then with Neuvillette you've got the new like ceiling with quality of life, but like whatever, the overall strength of a carry, right? It gets a new ceiling and then it stays for a while. And then with Mavuika, you got a new ceiling because of the amount of damage. I hope it stays there for a while, right? I hope it's like a staircase, not a f***ing slope. I hope the gap in between units doesn't keep being the same as the one between Mavuika and previous carries, right? I really hope this is like just a new ceiling that is now going to be what like new carries are aiming for, rather than an indicator of even more power creep to come. Giving them credit where credit's due, in Sumeru post Nahida, there were pretty much no changes to optimal meta stuff. In Fontaine post, I guess Neuvillette plus Farina, so I guess post Farina, there are pretty much no changes to optimal meta stuff. So let's hope that in Natlan post Mavuika, there's gonna be no changes to optimal meta stuff. But boy, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that goes. Anyways, thank you for watching. Hope you learned a thing or two. Hope you enjoyed the yap. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, YouTube.